Aubrey Marcus, welcome to the show.
What's up, Tim?
Hey, man, I'm going to shake your hand because I don't usually do
brother.
video. And here we are
man.
in the Shanghai of Texas, otherwise known as Austin. I've never seen so many cranes in one place in the United States.
Yeah, it's thriving.
It is really thriving, and I think we're on the cusp of all sorts of fun in the next couple of years.
I like it. People whine about it like, oh, Austin used to be this kind of reminiscing fantasy thing. I think it's just getting better.
Well, I think it's like talking to someone who went to a concert in the early days with any band.
Burning Man.
They're like, Burning Man used to be so cool, man, in 2007 before you got here in 2008.
Yeah.
Grateful Dead, I was at their first show. Now it's so uncool.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussion along those lines about Austin, but you are one of the people I know best here in Austin.
Yep.
And I'm thrilled to have you in front of the mic.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you came out. It's been dope. Got to hang out, have some wine, have some dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
I know I'm not impressing anyone with my 45-pound deadlifts in the Onnit gym. You have a lot.
No, but it's your persistence, though, Tim. It's the fact that you do it so many times and only do that.
That's true.
Actually, oh, wow.
That's true. Well,
That's
last
remarkable.
time you saw me in that gym, I was working on a program from Jerzy Gregorek, the 63-year-old former world record holder in Olympic weightlifting, doing only overhead squats, if I remember correctly, for like an hour and a half.
Like all day. Yeah. What's Tim doing now? More overhead squats?
So part of the reason I wanted to have you here to have this conversation is that I feel like you are one of the people who really walks the walk in checking the boxes of these overlapping spheres of life, whether that is body, business, let's just call it balance. And I'm actually borrowing this bit from a weekend event one of my friends went to not too long ago. But you've done a really good job of integrating those various pieces. And so this format of this particular podcast is going to be a bit experimental and jarring maybe in its lack of transitions. But I want to start with a question I was recently asked at a small dinner. Okay. And the question was posed by a guy named Michael Hebbs, who's a fascinating guy, very good chef, organizes dinners around specific topics very often. Yeah. So he did one, I think it was called Dinner or Dining with Death, and it was in cooperation with NPR, and it was a facilitated conversation around mortality. And he's done many of these and had a small dinner with him in LA with about 6 to 8 people, and no one really knew any other attendee. And to break the ice, he started with this question, which just opened up the floodgates so that everyone got very vulnerable and very open very quickly. Yeah. And this is it. So thank you, Michael. When is the last time that you cried tears of joy that you remember?
Oh, man. That wasn't too long ago. That's a more frequent occurrence for me, actually. And as I've done, a lot of work on my life, and it hasn't been the external stuff that ever makes me cry tears of joy. It's not a big Onnit success. It's not something external that happens. It's really just sitting in a moment. It can be with a lover that I'm sharing a night with, and I'll just start crying, and just the experience of enjoying that simple moment, or laughing with friends, it's actually a rather frequent occurrence. And that's one of the best indicators for me that the path that I'm on is yielding the kind of fruit that I'm really looking for and looking to forage, because I catch myself doing that all the time. Today I had a little informal mentorship with one of my employees. And just as I saw that breakthrough moment, I saw that moment where, I was talking about her working not on her business and not on her career at Onnit, but on her heart, and and she was like, yeah, it's a big project. And I go, yeah, it is a big project. And I saw that light come up, and just the tears will come in that moment for me too. It's just like, fuck yeah, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then just the gratitude for being able to do what I'm supposed to be doing, it'll come.
Is that something that has always been the case, or is that something that has become more frequent with any kind of trigger or catalyst?
It was very rare. I think it was very rare, because I think most of my life I was trying to achieve something. I was trying to validate myself externally, trying to say, if I get to this point, then I'll be successful. Then I'll be, living up to my potential. Then I'll be that. And whether it was in high school for basketball, like, oh, if I make all state honors, then I'll be there. If we make it far in the playoffs, then I'll be there. And it was always this next thing, but it's never the next thing. You can keep searching for that next thing. You're not going to find it until you turn that gaze truly inward. And as that process is gone, and I've almost kind of exhausted the external thing, so it's kind of forced me to go internal. Because when Onnit was successful and the external was great, then and I still wasn't that happy deeply, then I was like, all right, it's definitely not external. Like this is internal. And that's driven me deeper and deeper inside my heart.
So if I look back at my own experience with relationships with people who've unfortunately taken their lives, it's not the outwardly depressing cases that you would expect. It's actually very often the people who have a lot of money. Not always, certainly, but it strikes me that, for instance, one of my best friends, Andrea, in high school, then 2 friends later in college, seemed to have everything going for them. And I shouldn't say of course, but nobody saw these coming. And they all had a good amount of money. And my theory related to that, based on what I see also in people who are from the outside looking in, very, very successful, very, very wealthy, but miserable, is that for a long time, for most of life, if you're fighting for every scrap to get this external validation, you can envision a day when I have X, it'll all be great.
Yep.
And this anxiety I feel, this fill in the blank that I feel will go away, and then it doesn't go away. And so then at that point, if you've checked the boxes, it seems like you can lose hope. Or if you grow up rich and you realize it does not, in fact, as a panacea solve your problem. So my question then, walk us through how you shifted your gaze to be more internal, because I've seen that in you. We haven't known each other that long. We've known each other a while.
Yeah.
And I'd love to just hear how you made the decision or how you were forced to look inward, because a lot of people get to a point where the outside world, third parties, would think of them as successful, but they never shift the gaze.
Yeah.
So how did it happen?
It's in combination from like external pressure, external pain, internal pain, like pain as a motivator to let you know that something is wrong. And then, so that's kind of like your engine light blinking.
Yeah.
And then it's the practices that I've employed that help me have that introspection to actually go searching and figure out what it is. So it's always been a combination of that pain plus the tools to go seek out where that pain is coming from. And I was fortunate, I was given an opportunity to do a vision quest when I was just out of high school, and I was staunch atheist, zero spirituality.
How did that come to
That
be?
was through my father. And I had a lot of issues with my dad, but he was in a lot of pain himself, and that had taken him down, to try everything from primal therapy to all kinds of different conventional methods, eventually into psychedelics, working with Stan Groff, doing holotropic breathing, doing LSD psychotherapy, and he found a shaman who worked with psilocybin in the mountains. And
where was this?
This was in the mountains of New Mexico. And he, after high school, in that traditional kind of vision quest kind of idea, said, you should go experience this. Because at that point, he would talk about anything on the fringe of spirituality. And I'd grown up here in Texas and getting washed with religion, capital R religion. I was like, fuck that, Dad, like, I'm not interested in that. Like, I saw the dungeons of the Inquisition. This is bullshit, this is bad. And he's like, no, just check it out, and see what happens. It's a vision quest. And I respected Native American culture enough and traditional culture enough that I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. And I was fucking terrified. Terrified.
Can you explain to people or describe what that vision quest entails?
Yeah, it's it's a traditional rite of passage where typically a young man, but it can be any man, goes to find an aspect of themselves that has been hidden, some calling, some piece of them that they don't know about, that they aren't aware of. And that's certainly what happened. I was given a tea in the mountains in a very isolated place with a very loving and warm, mushroom shaman. And she gave me a tea. And then after a little while, I felt my entire body evaporate into geometry. And I was like, oh shit. I got a lot of things wrong. There is something else to this experience. And that was just this, I stayed up all night writing, and there was thunderstorms and the coyotes howling. I don't know, they sounded like wolves, but I'm probably coyotes being in New Mexico. And it was this crazy night of just realizing that my whole paradigm at that point had shifted. I'd realized that I'm not just body and mind. There's something else that I access, something that could observe both of those things. And that's been kind of like the fallback, teacher for me. and finding the ways then to not just use the medicines, but find ways to get there in other means, because that's kind of like a feast. You can't feast every night, finding the other ways to access that identification point.
So you do not have kids, as far as I know, at this point that you're aware of.
But if I do have any kids out there and you want to claim it, like, we'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. I'm in a pretty good spot now.
Support it on Onnit.com.
Yeah.
When you have kids, I'm not sure if that's in the cards, but if you do, would you walk them through, let's just say you have a son. It doesn't necessarily matter, son or daughter. Would you walk them through or introduce them to a rite of passage like that?
Fuck yeah. Like, there's undoubtedly.
How would you structure it? What do you think it would look like?
Well, I think as a parent, as a dad, you have to kind of get out of the way, because part of the vision quest is getting your kid out of your purview,
right?
Like allowing them to become their own man. So I would find someone who is, separate enough from me that I wasn't influencing the experience, and someone I trusted. And, I know a lot of people right now, and I'm sure I'll know a lot of people even then. And talking to, MAPS and talking to Hefter and talking to those organizations that are working on the legalization of these as medicines, I think there's going to be a lot of cool options for people to do that completely above board and legally by the time I have a kid. I mean, they're targeting 2021 for MDMA therapy and psilocybin sometime after that. So I think there's going to be a lot of options, and it's going to become more common. And, I just send them with someone I really trusted and allow the process to unfold. And that's the thing. You really don't want to guide it too much. You want to have the guide and allow the medicine and nature and everything around them to be the teacher.
I'm sure there are people watching or listening who have had early, say, adolescent or high school or college experiences with psychedelics, but viewed them in retrospect as sort of uncontrolled recreational. So do you think the reason that vision quest stuck with you, how much of it was the psychedelics versus the ceremony versus the guidance? I mean, if you had to try to weight those factors, how would you?
They're inextricable. They're inextricable.
Right.
Like the experience itself blends together and becomes inseparable. Like you couldn't take one part and have it all be there. It was the trust that I had in the guide. Because I think one of the big problems with taking psychedelics haphazardly, like, am I going to die?
Right.
Is this am I going to get busted by the cops? Is this the right environment? What is that? Is that person looking at me funny?
Yeah.
Like all of these crazy things come in and can steer it into really squirrely pathways, but having that steady, loving presence available and just being out in the land and having it and knowing that I was part of a lineage that had done this thousands of times for many, many generations, that what gave me the support system to be able to really let go. Because I think you can really stay tense and fight these experiences. And you get stories and reports of people taking incredibly high doses and they're like still so bound up, they can't even release into it. But having a guide that really you trust is absolutely essential, because they're really guiding you through this massive bursting of a cocoon, and it's pretty terrifying on its own. And having somebody there to help is absolutely essential. And I only recommend doing it in that context until you're somewhat of a master yourself.
Yeah, agreed. And definitely get external verification that you're a master. I've been on YouTube and I think I understand this well enough. I'm a black belt now.
Yeah. I watched Triple Rainbow 3 times. I know what bliss is.
Yeah, exactly. What did you think you wanted to be when you grew up, when you were 16, 17, 18?
I think I was always into history, and I would look at all the great conquering heroes and the great kings and the people who had led these big movements. And I looked around, and obviously, Genghis Khan was kind of an asshole. I didn't really want to kill people, and that's not the way it happens anymore. So really the people leading the movements, you had politicians, but they didn't seem like they were quite doing anything that I was interested in. And then so you had, business leaders and thought leaders and authors. And so I think I always knew I was going to end up in one of those categories, either leading an organization or writing books or speaking or something. And interestingly, I doubted myself the whole way because I failed at absolutely everything I tried. And
like what? What did you try that didn't work out?
Literally everything. I mean, I tried gold mining. I tried some variety of different online retail, from sex toys to skincare to I tried oil and gas. I tried like
oil and gas, like trading, investing?
No, I was like invest like investor relations, like trying to convince people to go bet on some wildcat fucking oil well in the middle of nowhere that never works, and I'd get some stock options like this one's going to hit, never hit, nothing. But now looking back, I'm grateful because I literally failed at everything that wasn't directly going to serve my purpose. And all of those failures, all the lessons gave me the strength to be able to hold an organization of this magnitude that I'm holding now. Like the person that I was then couldn't run Onnit. Like I couldn't write the book that I wrote. I couldn't do the things that I'm doing. I couldn't have this conversation now because my ego would get in the way and all kinds of things. I wasn't ready yet. And so the universe was like, no, not ready. Fail. But I was like, man, I'm 30 and I've failed at everything. I scratched out a little money here and there. I was doing all right, doing better than some of my peers when I would go buy bottles at the club and party. Like I could buy a more expensive bottle than they could. And so everybody's like, yeah, Aubrey, you're killing it. I'm like, I'm not fucking killing it. Yeah. I'm like blowing it. Yeah. And that was tough. And then finally it just kind of lined up with the right timing and the right idea and the right person leading it, meaning me. And it was able to come to fruition.
So let's start with a snapshot of where we are now. And then I'm going to go back to you and your dad in 16 for a second.
Yeah.
So Onnit, what is Onnit? How many employees do you have? What are you proudest of that Onnit has done or is doing?
We have Onnit's, we call it total human optimization. So what I realized early on is that you couldn't, and you mentioned this in the intro, like balance. Mm-hmm. You really can't specialize in only one thing and really reach the potential of that thing. You have to support everything else. Like you can go super hard in one direction, but your health is going to fall apart. Your relationship's going to fall apart. And ultimately that's going to start being weight. It's going to be anchors that's going to drag against your progress. And it's going to be a headwind for you in anything that you're doing. And it's the same with the body. Like you can take great supplements, but if your nutrition is shitty and your workouts are shitty and your sleep is shitty and your mentality is shitty, so what? It's not going to matter. So total human optimization is the idea to raise everything at the same time and really try to incrementally improve. And it's not as flashy and sexy as this 30-day transformation expert in this one area, but it really works and it's through to the bone. And I think that's what I'm probably most proud of is that Onnit is what it appears to be. Like you go there, the people who are there, from me to Kyle to everybody who's in the organization, they feel that movement. The people who follow Onnit, they feel that movement. I think it's just the vibe and the authenticity of what we stand for, the ability to be a little bit better tomorrow than you are today. And I think that's probably what I'm most proud of.
How many employees do you have?
180 employees if you count our yoga studios and count the gym and count the other entities that we own.
How many employees did you have 10 years ago? When was Onnit
founded? Started in 2011. Well, originally 2010, 0 employees 2010. I was making like hangover supplements. Mostly because I was partying too much. And I was, really a lot of this was, well, where's the need for me? Well, at that point I was just drinking my head off because I was unhappy. So I first started making hangover supplements and then realized like, that's not where I'm going. Where I'm going is to really improve my life in all areas. And that's when we pivoted to Alpha Brain and different things. And we started and there was one employee who was like, kind of like my right-hand guy, part assistant, part, whatever, everything, the everything
odd
guy,
job.
the odd job, 100%. And then, we started getting geared up with Alpha Brain. And then when it hit and we actually started having sales, then it was just like grabbing every friend that had something of a shaky job that I could trust and say, quit, come, and let's fucking figure it out. And I was in the attic of a little boutique that my fiance at the time, Caitlin, was running. And we were in the attic of this boutique and we were just bringing out literal trash bags of orders that we were hand labeling, from the top of it. And that's how it started. I mean, we didn't have a lot of fun. I'd blown through the only funding I got. I got 100,000 from my friend Bodie Miller, who's the Olympic skier at the time, who's a really significant friendship for me. And then an old investment banking contact that somehow didn't go broke when all the wildcat wells, dried up. And, I don't know how he ever made money because everything I ever saw him do didn't work, but he gave me 50 grand. So I had $110,000. I blew through a lot of that trying to market these hangover supplements. And it was like literally like the last $20,000 invested in an order of Alpha Brain on net 30. And then it hit. We sold out in 24 hours. And
so
then,
net 30 meaning you had 30 days to pay for your manufacturing and
exactly,
cover the cost.
Exactly. It was all in, man. It was just like, here we go. Let's see.
So I promised I'd get back to this. So I want to not leave people hanging, and then we're going to come back to the attic. 16. You mentioned you had a lot of maybe a complicated relationship with your dad. A conflicted relationship. Vision quest.
Yeah.
Was that an overnight experience, or was it multiple days? Overnight. All right. So you have this vision quest. Two things, if you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
How was your relationship with your dad complicated? I think that's true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right? As for those people who want a good quote, I think it was Ram Dass, formerly Richard Alpert. You can look up his history. But he said, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. So we all have our stuff.
Yeah.
We all have our stuff. How was the relationship complicated? How would you describe it? And then did the vision quest affect it in any way?
It did, but that took a long time to unpack. In fact, that's still unpacking, honestly. Like there's actually been an understanding, a realization that's actually led to a lot greater happiness for me. And I'll talk about that, when I get to it. But if I go from the start, my dad was a tortured soul. And from his father, who I never met, his father used to hold trials for him and his brother. He was a lawyer. And he would hold trials like Franz Kafka style. They're like 6 and 8 years old, and put them on trial, and they'd have to petition their defense, and he would hammer them and cross-examine them, and then read out their sentence, and like some crazy shit like that. So it wasn't ever like physical or sexual, but like massive, like emotional mindfuckery.
Serious
right?
head games. Yeah.
Serious. And so my dad had, he had a lot of his own demons, and he started on the path to heal himself, as I said, to try and pass as little as he could off on his sons. Mm-hmm. But, he didn't quite get there by the time he had me. So one little thing I would say, I remember one time he was playing ping pong. I was about 4 years old. He's playing ping pong. He mishits a ball. Ball goes flying off the thing. And I run by and I go, home run. I'm a little kid. I'm like, the fucking ball went out of the thing. 2 days later, he corners me, throws me down in a corner, and starts yelling at me. How could you insult me like that in front of my competition? How dare you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa. Like, I couldn't even fathom that.
Yeah.
Like, it had so lost, gone out of my mind.
Right.
So it built this kind of fear around everything I say could be misinterpreted.
Right.
And that
especially with that delay.
Exactly. The delay was the killer. Like if it was right away, you're like, hot stove, ouch. Okay, I get it. But that forced me to internalize it because I'd be going over everything I said the previous day. So there's this massive lack of trust around my dad, which I didn't really realize. And then fast forward, and we had a good relationship in a lot of other ways. He was a brilliant man and taught me a lot, and I'm grateful for our relationship. But I didn't realize that I never really trusted men, particularly men that had that kind of paternal role. So anybody who I had in that kind of father category, even peer category, like even when I'd give him a hug, I'd be like, yeah, I'll hug you, but I don't fucking trust you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if one thing I said, a while ago is going to cause you to go off. And I didn't really realize that I was doing that to more people other than my father. Like it was extending universally to all men until recently, someone who I had held in that kind of father mentor kind of role, our relationship really got, went askew and went haywire. And I realized like, oh shit, I'm really damaged by this. Like this is really traumatic to me. And where is this coming from? Oh, this is coming from my dad. This is that same pattern repeating.
Did that just to occur to you while you were in the shower, or what was were you journaling? What prompted that realization?
Yeah, I think it came kind of slowly, and it was unpacking. I'm constantly doing different work and introspection. And it was somehow that pain, that external pain, again, going back to external pain being one of those indicators, like, why am I fucking devastated by this? Like, why am I completely floored? This is applying universally to everything. Right. I was like really crushed. Then I couldn't bounce back. And then, so it just forced me to keep looking like, what is this? Like, why do I care so much?
When you say crushed, was that something your mentor or the person in that role had said to you that threw you off? Or?
It was an instance that repeated the pattern where I had, and I don't want to get into the details specifically, but like I had said and done, I'd said and done some things that were interpreted in a way that I didn't intend. And it caused a break in our friendship,
a rift,
and a lot of anger. And so it was that pattern of, I'm never safe. No matter what I say or do, it can be interpreted in a different way, and I'll never be safe. And it really allowed me to look at that and analyze that and say, all right, I got to get to the bottom of this, and I got to understand where this is coming from. And simultaneously, like, I met Kyle Kingsbury, who's become one of my best friends. Probably if I was to get married now, he'd be my best man. And he's also probably the most stable dude I know.
Yeah.
And so like it was a combination of having one example of like the most, really think I can trust this guy.
Yeah.
Like you can push him to the extreme and he doesn't shift, like under pain, under duress, under fatigue, under psychedelics, under alcohol, under anything.
There's an incredible amount of self-awareness from what I've observed of him under duress. I've seen him under duress, and he can go from that initial experience of overwhelm to completely centered in a few minutes. It's
remarkable. And we're talking about Kyle Kingsbury, who's our director of human optimization, former UFC fighter. But yeah, it was a combination of one spinning off and then one being solid, and realizing somewhere in there, I can't pinpoint the moment, but I realized, like this is all stuff from my father. I've never really trusted men ever since that point. So that was like a second weird coming of age at 36. I'm about to turn 37, where I finally felt like I didn't need to prove anything to my dad. I didn't need to get validated. I didn't need to show him that I was worthy of love anymore, or any other man for that matter. And I could actually trust that I really do have male friends, and I really do have people who I can trust. And if they go off, that's okay. It's not me. It's not my fault. It's just a pattern that happened from when I was growing up. And that's been huge for me. That's been huge because I've always retreated to females as my solace and my comfort, and having like male friends that I can really rely on and trust and kind of be vulnerable with in a really authentic way. I mean, I would go do ceremonies and stuff, but I'd always kind of keep my shell up, you know, and now to be able to relax into that, it's just, I feel like a much happier individual, you know, like much more solid, like having, you know, brothers of the way. Yeah. You know, it's cool.
Well, if half the people you encounter are like potential threats.
Exactly.
That's a lot of day-to-day existence.
And I can't even, I mean, I sympathize so much with people who've had both those roles be off center, off kilter. Yeah. You know, like if you had your mother and your father, let's say your father was abusive and your mother permitted it, and there was some weird dynamic there, then both sides you don't trust. And then you just don't trust the fucking world. Yeah. You know, I was super lucky. I had one half dialed in, you know, so I had a place to retreat. I had a place to rest. You know, if you have neither, that's a hell of a challenging road, but the good news is you make it through that, you'll be even stronger because of it. Yeah. You know?
And you can help people if you do the work. And I'm going to get back to the attic in a second, but if you do the work, what I've realized also just recently, and I mean, I'm 40 now, but if no matter your circumstances or the hand you've been dealt, if you do the work to uncover the wounds, heal the wounds, or at least accept that they exist and begin to process that you're not only doing the work for yourself, but you can then in turn help other people who've experienced the same thing or similar things, right? So it's really valuable work, hard to understate.
That's almost the turning point, right? When you take your lessons and your knowledge and then you can help other people, at that point you got the inspiration and you got the momentum. That's the final healing catalyst. It's not healing yourself. It's then knowing that everything that you've suffered, all of that pain you've endured can now help someone else. It alchemizes it instantly into something that's valuable, something you can be grateful for. Yeah. And when you're grateful for something, it's no longer trauma. Yeah. Like you've healed it. Like that's the full circle, is gratitude for that, for what it's given you.
Yeah. At least for me too, the regard for myself or healing myself, this sounds really odd to say, but wasn't enough to motivate me to do the work I knew would be really difficult. But as soon as I realized, even if I have no regard or very little regard for myself, if I can then develop a toolkit, learn about A, B, and C, and impart that to other people, that's enough to motivate me. And since have developed more regard for myself, but it's like, hey, you got to take what works. And for me, it was that realization, I can actually hand this baton off to other people. Let's work with what motivates.
Yeah. Look at every like great epic novel, like what gets the hero inspired? It's not his own safety. He's fine, like chopping wood and being in the forest. But when, you know, the oppressing force starts fucking with his family or starts fucking with his kids, you know, then you unleash William Wallace. You know, like if they didn't slit Mern's throat, like there may not be Scotland. Right. You know, there's just the UK. You know what I mean? Like we're wired to really care for those we love almost more than ourselves. It's just part of the social dynamic, and you can tap in, you can like hack into that current and use that to your advantage. And that's like the cleanest burning fuel you got. That's like a fusion reactor from the sun, you know? Yeah. And that's really what's going to motivate you, not the other, you know, ego-based stuff. That's like burning coal. You know, you're going to run out of that shit at some point, and it's not going to work for you.
And you have to breathe in the fumes too.
Exactly.
So you're just turning, or you have turned 37?
Tomorrow.
Happy early birthday.
Thanks, man.
All right, 37. So if we rewind the clock, I think you said 2011, right? So you're like 29, 30. And fulfilling orders out of the attic. I remember those days, by the way. Yeah. When I started my first real business, also in sports nutrition. I remember when I decided to get a fulfillment company was when I had to race off to the post office to ship off packages. My car wouldn't start. So I got on my motorcycle, used motorcycle, with a garbage bag, big, like dark garbage bag full of boxes.
Yep.
And I'm wrapping it around the throttle to try to make it to the post office. Almost die, obviously. And I get back. I'm like, that was dumb.
You didn't want to go Santa Claus
I
style?
I didn't.
Hold it over your back.
I'd have to really switch grips if I went Santa Claus. So I decided just to risk life and limb with it on the throttle. And I came back. I was like, okay, now it's time to start to outsource things. The question I wanted to ask you is, all right, so you get up to betting the farm on...
Which is a very small farm.
Yeah, like, it's a very small farm.
I'm not that courageous.
You're betting the backyard on this manufacturing out of Alpha Brain with net 30 terms. If we bounce out, say, 2 years, so to 32, from 16 to 32, it could even be earlier, from like 12 to 32, do you remember any point in time when you were like, wow, this is the richest I've ever felt? Because I remember one very specific day in my experience, but when was that? What was that moment when you're like, wow, well, I feel successful, or wow, this is more than I could have anticipated?
Yeah, I mean, that happened pretty quick after that, because that, you know, with those net 30 terms, I was able to, in the sales, I was really able to scale pretty aggressively without taking on extra capital or anything. And we had no overhead. I mean, that was just the cost of the product itself and a couple of friends who we were paying like 25, 30 grand, whatever we could kind of push together. And then, you know, it started to grow a little bit from there, but it was a lot of sales, you know, just product costs and a lot of shipments, no additional advertising. Because at that point, you know, Rogan was the business partner. He was the advertising engine. He'd bought into the company. So I'd give an equity in exchange for the marketing. And I was, you know, there was serious money coming in. And I started looking at houses, and I was looking at this house, and I was thinking maybe, you know, $600,000, $700,000 range, really get a house I could sink my teeth into. And I saw this house that was $1 million. I was like, $1 million house. Like, damn. I was like, I think I can swing it. I think I can fucking swing it. You know, and it was just because it was my dream house. You know, it had a nice backyard, and I envisioned what's there now, which is axe throwing and slackline and pool and deck and fire pit. I was like, I can do this here in this house. And it had my style. And I just, you know, at that point, again, a little bit early, but I still went for it. Like, I think I can, this thing looks solid enough, I can go in. And when I went into that house, that was like a big moment for me, because that was a real house. That was like that was a big boy house. Yeah. I was like, I got a fucking big boy house now. And that was really the moment for me. I was like, damn, this is awesome.
Yeah, and you've turned it into the Aubrey Marcus house of Ninja Warrior training and assorted delights.
Yeah, it's been heaven. You know? It's been heaven.
You mentioned a name that, for those people who don't have context, I want to explore for a second. So you mentioned Rogan, Joe Rogan. So some of you listening, of course, know who Joe is. Most certainly, I would say arguably the most powerful single sort of interview format podcaster, period. Part of the inspiration, certainly one of the inspirations for me starting my own podcast, was being across the table from Joe and having such a wonderful experience, able to go long form, be myself.
Battle robes.
He fed me, you know, I don't know if I ever told you this, I'm going to digress for a second because that's what I do. Very first time I was on his show, he said, because I've been on twice, he said, do you want some bulletproof coffee? Sure. So he gave me like a huge, I mean, it must have been like 24 ounces of bulletproof coffee. And then he goes, do you want some Alpha Brain? I was like, Sure. So I had like a handful of Alpha Brain. And then he goes, do you want some pot? And I was like, I don't even smoke pot, but I'm a little intimidated. Joe's an intense guy.
Yeah, he's intense.
And maybe it's spending time in Japan. I was like, can't say no. All right. So I go into this interview on like 24 ounces of butter coffee, a handful of Alpha Brain, and pot, which I very rarely consume. Nothing against it. It's just not really my plant. And man, oh man, that was a hell of an experience. But how did you first meet Joe? Because I think this is going to tie into maybe a theme that I want to explore.
I listened to Joe do comedy, you know, and I'd seen him I was a huge UFC fan, all the way from UFC 1, literally, because my dad was a fan of the sport. We'd watch that together. That was some of the good times, his memories of watching.
It was a brutal first UFC.
Yeah, right.
I still remember the first match.
That Savat foot fighter kicked the tooth out of that
sumo
guy. Yeah.
Into the commentators. Oh boy, this is different.
Yeah, that was pretty epic. And so I'd seen him there, and so I think that probably drew me to listen to his comedy show. And then I listened to his comedy show, and I was like, oh shit, he's thinking about the same things that I'm thinking about. Like, he's done psychedelics. He's into worrying about aliens and super volcanoes and all this stuff. I was like, man, I got to meet this guy. And I kept running into him at different events, because I'd go to some of the UFCs, you know, when I could, and I'd see him out. And at that point, he was still going to clubs and occasionally going to strip clubs. And
did he have the podcast at this point?
No, I don't think he did when I first started at that point. And then, but you know, I'm just a fan at that point. So I'd say, hey Joe, you know, blah, blah, blah. And you know, you're in like kind of fan zone at that point. And, you know, I saw more of his comedy show. Then he launched the podcast. And then that was super early in the podcast game. And he had no commercials, and it was just him and Red Band, and they were just bullshitting. And it was just like a fun thing that
everybody who knows Joe Rogan, like all in caps marquee Joe Rogan, should go back and see some of the early shows. I think it's inspiring to see where it began.
No doubt. Yeah. And I had an idea at that point, like, oh, well, he doesn't have advertising on his show. Maybe I'll hit him up for, you know, to do some advertising and use that as a chance to like meet him and maybe elevate out of the fan zone so we can have a conversation. So I remember I set up a lunch meeting to just 30 minutes to just meet somewhere, talk to him about advertising on his show.
This was in LA?
This was in LA, yeah. Mm-hmm. And
did you fly out just for this, or were you already there?
I did. And actually it was interesting. It was like the universe gave me a test. So Bodie Miller, who I mentioned before, Olympic skier, you know, still in his Playboy mode at the time, he invited me for my first Kentucky Derby experience. And it was like, oh man, I got a cancellation, got full VIP access, craziest parties you've ever seen, suite at the Kentucky Derby. And I was like, and I had that one meeting with Rogan that was right in the middle of that. I was like, man, I can't go. I got to take this meeting with Joe.
Ooh.
And it was like a cool test. Yeah, it was like a cool test, you know. And so I took that meeting, and a 30-minute meeting to talk about advertising quickly turned into all those things: psychedelics, super volcanoes, and genetic bottleneck theory, and aliens, and all the philosophical things that we talked about. And after that, he's like, hey man, I'd love to have you come on the show and we can talk more about this. So I went on the show, and just as friends, just started having a relationship with him. And it was a couple years after that I asked him the question, like, hey man, like, what supplement would you like the best yourself? Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm into nootropics. And I was like, man, I'm going to make the best one that's ever been made. Mm-hmm. And I'll let you know about it.
All right. So this was like made to order. This was like,
this was it.
Bespoke Joe Rogan product.
Yeah. Bespoke.
So I didn't know that. Now, you mentioned in passing something earlier, and I don't know if this is the product that you were meeting to advertise.
Oh, I bet it was.
I bet it was. So you mentioned the SEXTOYS.
Oh yeah.
So what are we talking about?
This was the number one selling male sex toy in the world, the one and only Fleshlight.
Fleshlight.
Yes. Right, a convenient pocket pussy concealed in a obnoxiously large flashlight container.
Which, by the way, I should say, on this podcast, had Alice Little, who is the number one earning, as far as I know, legal sex worker in the U.S. And one of her top recommendations was, her pronouncements was, I wish I could get a fleshlight for every male in the country for a number of different reasons. So,
all right, solid endorsement.
You've left a legacy. All right, so the people can look that up if they would like, but that was the product context for that meeting.
That was the client that I was working with, and I was like, oh man, maybe Joe will do something with this. And Joe brought that to his people. His people were like, no way, you can't do it.
Now, when you say client, so you've done a lot of different things at this point. Onnit does not exist.
Onnit does not exist. Okay. So I have a marketing company, and that boutique marketing company has, a few people that are working with me, and I have, again, a bunch of clients, most of which failed, but I couldn't fail at selling sex toys because people just want things to fuck. And it was a very easy thing to learn and not suck at. So I was able to help make that thing work. And so I had that one going, and he liked just the ridiculousness of it. And he liked the idea of not taking this show too seriously to do something like that. And so he just went for it. And so if you go back to the old JREs, there'll be old Fleshlight ads.
I remember
on there. And
might actually there. Well, let's see. So I came about. Now, did the Fleshlight and Onnit overlap at all, or no?
No,
did not.
So I started Onnit after I actually got myself in a position where I was able to transition out of that company with some severance. Never got any other incentives, but got a pretty generous severance. And took that and just rode it into, starting Onnit and just running. And then I had that $110,000, and I tried to dip into that as little as possible with my own, utilization.
That was the severance.
No, that was the investment from
Oh,
Bodie
I got
and
it.
from
Right.
the other person.
Bodie and the iBanker.
And plus the severance, and just kind of rode that to the very brink of nothing.
Yeah.
And then again, it just came through like right in the nick of time.
What are some of the, if I know you read a lot, I've seen your library. It's one of the first things I do if I get to someone's house and I see a bookshelf or bookshelves, is I go start browsing. So you can learn a lot by browsing, including which books I haven't read. Not in your case, but it's like if you see War and Peace, you're like, all right, yeah, definitely Moby Dick. Like, ask about those. I have War and Peace. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't read it. It's too intimidating. I will get to it eventually, but. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Which books or resources do you view as having been very helpful in the early days of Onnit or later? But are there any particular books that helped you or helped you think about and develop the business?
There is a direct correlation between my inner work and the outer success of Onnit. Like, that correlation is as clean an association as anything I have. So I haven't been one that's read a lot of business books. A lot of the books that I've read have been internally,
which is
internally focused.
Totally fair game.
And there's been some really significant books that I've read that have kind of shaped who I am. And I think the first was kind of following that line of the Toltec philosophy, from crazy Carlos Castaneda through Don Miguel Ruiz. And I think actually his most powerful book, although it's a little bit hard to get into, is The Toltec Art of Life and Death, which is, a lot of people know Don Miguel Ruiz from the Four Agreements.
Four Agreements, yeah.
And then he wrote Mastery of Love, which is an incredible exploration of love and relationship. And then his true masterwork is The Toltec Art of Life and Death. And then the thing I liked about it is it was the first complete system, a complete spiritual, physical, emotional system that, was self-contained. Like, it was like its own religion to a certain extent, but except it was something that I could believe and I could buy into and was practical, and I could utilize those principles of the warrior ethos and the principles of the Nagual, the artist who paints his masterpiece, versus the person who allows the mitote, they called it, which is the dream of the world, to shape their experience. And so that transition from just allowing everything, expectations and pressures from this person and that person to shape who I was, to becoming the Nagual, the artist who
more proactive, instead of reactive,
who uses your intention to actually create the world around him and paint that masterpiece, and the laughter as the kind of guide, knowing that you've made it. And I always say that, like, you can tell a spiritual master by the sound of their laughter. Like, if they aren't laughing, I'm not going to drink your cup of ayahuasca. Like, if you don't have a good belly laugh, like, you're missing the point, And that's been a really solid guidebook, and a place that if anybody's searching, I would definitely check out Toltec philosophy.
Toltec.
Yeah.
Art of Life and Death. Any other books come to mind?
As far as like building, because part of building a company is building like a society.
Kyle of 10 years ago came to you and said, I need 3 books.
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
Aldous Huxley's Island, I think, was another crucial book for me. And that was utopian fiction. But the beauty of that is it was seeing how a system could work in mass, and it was the first exposure to rewriting the rules of how everything could be, and understanding like, oh, we could just change everything. Like, everything could be malleable. And then what are the downstream effects? And it's that classic clash of utopia versus dystopia and how it all merges. And that's been something I've consistently fallen back on with a lot of like help and principles. So I think that one was huge. And then honestly, personally, this has nothing to do with Onnit, but personally, the book Sex at Dawn by Chris Ryan was probably the third most influential single book, because at that point I was frustrated in conventional monogamous relationship, and I thought that humans were like lions and we were supposed to fight to the death to protect all our mates, and that women should be happy if they found the right lion, and Sex at Dawn is like, no, humans like having sex, both sides. We're always going to like having sex, and that's just the nature of things. And I go, oh man, like I had this wrong. It's not just me that's supposed to want other lovers. It's everybody that's, from an instinctive, primitive concept really is open to having a more expanded view of sexuality. And that's led me down, that was the initial domino that led me down the path of exploring open relationship, which has been a huge, advancement in my own personal happiness and fulfillment. Challenging as hell. I mean, challenging as hell. But that book, if it wasn't for that book, I don't think I ever would have given it a try, because I was operating under a false premise.
So for people who are listening and they're like, you know what, I'd like to give that more expanded view of sexuality a shot.
Good luck.
Any guideposts, any particular like guidelines?
You have to be super committed. Like, do not, know that it's going to be hell. Like, you can have it all sorted. I had it all sorted mentally. I understood it philosophically. I understood it spiritually. I understood it biologically. I understood it in evolutionary terms. But the moment that Whitney had another lover, I spent 24 hours crawling around on the ground vomiting every time I thought of her having sex with somebody else. Like literally dry heaving, like a massive purge that I couldn't even shake myself out of. Like, and that was step one. And then it gets a little bit better from there if you continue to do the work, but it takes a while to make it through. Like, you got to literally go through the darkness, the dark night of the soul of your own insecurities, all your fears and insecurities and validation points. Everything is going to be stress tested and challenged. If you make it through, you'll be really free. These things like jealousy, these things like insecurities, they will get pushed to the point where you either fix them or you just suffer and unbearable pain. So it forces you, again, external pain is that force. It'll put you in pain, and then it's up to you whether you can fix it or not.
So we could spend an entire podcast just discussing this. And, you and I have spent the equivalent of many podcasts talking about this. So maybe another time. But if we're looking back, this could be professional or personal. And of course, they're two sides of the same coin, no matter how you slice it. But do you have any particular failure that you can discuss? And I put failure in quotation marks because the goal is to describe a failure that later ended up setting the stage or planting a seed for a success later down the line. Are there any failures that come to mind, or a failure that you just learned a lot from and therefore that helped you later?
I failed at so many things, and every single failure was helpful. Like, every single fucking failure was helpful. And there's not one that stands out, but there's some that I remember. Like, I remember early in the days of Onnit, I allowed myself to get really stressed, and I was trying to record a video, and someone was knocking on my door, and I didn't respond. I was trying to stay in line with the video, and they kept knocking, and they kept knocking. This was when we had about 12 employees, 14 employees. And I blew up. I lost it. A little bit of my dad coming out. What the fuck do you want? If I don't answer the door when you knock, then I'm fucking busy. Right. I blew up, right? And then I was like, oh man. And I go out and I open the door, and it was like the sweetest employee we had, and I think her name was Samantha, and she's crying. And I go, oh my God, like, what did I just do? Like, she didn't know, and that was like a hard lesson. Like, I am not going to lose my temper no matter what is going on in my life. I will not allow my anger to come out on my employees ever, and it was like this deep, like that was deeply painful for me. Times I've done that in relationships too, where I've projected my own shit and put that on somebody else and watched them suffer from the pain that I've caused, and then having to deal with that. Every business, like I said, every business I did failed, and then me questioning my own self-worth. Like, I'm grateful for all of that. And I'm sorry for the people who had to suffer along the way, the people who bet on me and invested in me and I failed in their shit, and the people who I hurt with my anger, and the people who I hurt with my projections. But I'm grateful for the experience, because without all of that and without the grace of that happening, I wouldn't be a fraction of who I am.
Excuse me. allergic to anger. Something I wrestle with. Something I grapple with myself. So the anger piece, I'd love to touch on this because this is also part of my familiar cast of characters. And I think I've greatly improved over time with managing that as an impulse, something that really was embedded in me early.
Yeah.
And after that experience, what was your pattern interrupt? What did you say to yourself when you felt like the physiological response of about to hit takeoff?
Yeah.
In terms of losing temper or getting angry, what was the technique? What was the approach?
You know, it coincided with me talking because I started talking about that experience. And then of course, I was talking to my friend Duncan Trussell, who's pretty steeped in, kind of Buddhist philosophy. And he had a name for it. And I think it was Shumpa. And it's that feeling you get. It's that welling of energy. And it actually feels good. And I think it was acknowledging like there's some part of you that when that anger is coming, it like feels, it's a sense of power that's rising. And it's identifying that, and the Toltec philosophy also helps this. Don Miguel helped me with that. But you feel it rising, and it's like the swell of a wave. And there's a choice right there where you either paddle or you don't paddle. But to really identify the swell and identify like, oh yeah, this is gonna feel good. Like that power, putting on that mantle and like breathing fire, like it's going to feel good in certain ways. But the ramifications like never feel good. You know, the burning bodies, the house is on fire when you're breathing that dragon fire, that never feels good. So it's really a hard choice. I call it mental override to interrupt that pattern when I feel that shumpa or whatever Duncan called it, that moment of takeoff where I start to bristle and the dragon fucking tentacles come out and it starts to come. Like I can identify. Actually, oddly enough, I haven't felt this in a long time. I felt it yesterday. And I was leaving my office and literally I haven't been this angry in a long time. And someone on my team screwed something up super bad. And it was the second time on the same thing. I was like, oh my God. And I found out about it at 7:00 and I looked at a table and I wanted to smash it. I wanted to take the table and throw it on the ground and like smash it. And then I was like, oh yeah, there's that thing. Like I remember how I used to deal with this thing. All right, I'm going to go for a walk outside. And I would go for a walk outside. And then I read this Japanese study, and I talk about this in my book, where 6 deep breaths actually lowers blood pressure. Mm-hmm. So they say take a breath. It's not a breath, it's 6. Like 6 is the amount that it requires to get that physiological response. So I took my 6 breaths. I walked outside. And it wasn't gone. Like I carried it for a while. Yeah. I talked to people, but I at least eliminated it enough that initial wave of the big wave of the swell passed. So the big wave of the swell passed, and I paddled into a few other little ones. I body surfed on some whitewater of that rage for a little while.
Did a little longboarding.
Oh yeah, and I fucking hammered a few emails and paddled into it a little bit. But just my ability to recognize that and then trust the process, that I'll be grateful that I didn't paddle into that wave, even if it would have felt good at the moment. It's just been a gradual, slow experience.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things I want to underscore. Number one is that it's not a binary pass fail, right? It's not I completely quelled all of my anger, therefore I succeeded. And if I didn't do that, it's a failure. It's like, no, if you dial back 10%, that's a big deal.
Totally.
Right? It's the difference between like, hey, fuckface in an email and like, dear John, right? I mean, that's 10% is really meaningful.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, that it can be incremental, but the downstream effect of it can be much larger than that small increment of change you feel.
Yeah.
The second, when you're talking about failures, is that what a lot of folks might perceive as a failure, which is a path that isn't taken to completion over 10, 20, 30 years, can still have a lot of value. And that's why I brought up the fleshlight. Right? Like if it were not for that, you wouldn't have had the context to have the meeting, which then led to
I owe my success to pocket pussies.
Well, that actually leads us to, this might be your answer. This leads us to, I'm going to hit a couple of rapid fire questions. I'll try not to make them long-winded and therefore not rapid at all.
Yeah.
But if you could put one short message, word, quote, anything on a billboard, metaphorically speaking, just to get a message out to millions or billions of people, what would you put on it?
You know, I heard you ask this question to Wim Hof, and he said, "Breathe, motherfucker."
Breathe, motherfucker.
That was like the best answer to that. So I think about this, and you know, I think other podcasters have kind of co-opted that question and asked it. And you know, I was thinking about that question, and you know, I was thinking I wasn't happy with my answer. And then I realized, like, what I feel now, what best expressed the state I'm in, is what I would put on that billboard that was shown everywhere. I would say, "Welcome to heaven, population everyone." And that's really what I feel like. We have this choice right now to engage with life, all of life, and all the opportunity to smell and eat and travel and converse and meet people and have sex and enjoy and create and build. Like, this can be heaven, but we got to get out of our own mental hell first. And so reminding people like, hey, you know, all right, extenuating circumstances, maybe, you know, Sarajevo in certain places. Yeah, it's fucking tough. I get it. Externally, it might be hell. But for most of us, especially listening to this podcast, we're in heaven.
Yeah.
We're in heaven. Like, and it's just our choice whether we want to engage in it that way or whether we want to get stuck in our own patterns that keep us in hell.
What tools, and I'll volunteer one. I'm beta testing this, so it's not really fair, but I'm beta testing the Waking Up app, which Sam Harris is putting together. And it's actually been tremendously helpful and very unlike other programs I've tested for producing the non-ordinary states of awareness that one might correlate to the psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
And Sam's no stranger in that arena, but he is certainly passed on the chemical and plant infusions to focus on the meditative component. And I've found that very helpful for becoming less reactive and more response able in terms of being able to choose the lens through which I look at the day and my interactions. What else have you found helpful personally for living that billboard?
You know, one of the best ones that I've found came to me really unusually, and it's the practice of ecstatic dance. And because a lot of even psychedelics, you know, they kind of project your consciousness out of body. You know, but from my very first experience, it's like my body was gone. Like I didn't have that body somatic awareness. So I was creating and patterning this separation between consciousness, mind, and body. And then when I first did the ecstatic dance practice, I had no idea. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really uncomfortable. Because the idea is you listen to music and then you just move, not trying, you have a blindfold a lot of times or a really dark room, and you just move in expressive ways that push the boundaries of what your body is comfortable with, not physically, but comfortable in moving, and just collapse the mind, get to a state of superfluidity, a kind of flow state where it's just music and body. And I was shocked at how I responded. I mean, tons of emotions came up, tons of like clarity came up. I had visions that were coming through in that experience. And it was this massive, massive transformation for me because I felt it all the way through to my cells. You know, instead of getting the body out of the way, it was using the body as a tool to enhance my consciousness. And so it unified everything else. Instead of siloing it and kind of pulling it apart, it was pushing it all together in a really powerful way. And, you know, I've started leading those practices and doing those frequently. Like I will, if I'm feeling funky, I will just put on music, put on a hoodie, and I can be anywhere. I was just in Venice doing it in my little rental house in the middle of the day. I felt feeling kind of funky from recording the book and whatever. I just start moving. And I intentionally find those patterns that sends off the alarm signals. Like, don't move your hips like that because you'll be gay if you move your hip like that. Like if you move your arms too far out, like if they extend beyond 1 foot, totally gay. Like you can't do that, you know, and just force yourself to move into these other patterns that you're uncomfortable with. And let your body loose, like let your body free. We bind that up just like we bind up our psyche. And when you unbind the body and allow it to express freely in this safe container, I'm not saying go to the club and do it, you know, that's a lot of external pressure. But in this case, you know, do it by yourself in a dark room, put on some music, put on something with a tribal beat, and force yourself to move in those uncomfortable patterns and see what boundaries and restrictions you have for yourself. And then realize, like, where is that coming from? I can't allow myself to move in space by myself in the dark. What the hell? You know? And so that's been a really cool tool for me that I don't think a lot of people are engaging in, but it's something that ancestrally man, everybody was dancing as part of like sun dance rituals, trance dance rituals, all these dance rituals. That was a major part of ceremony for people. And I think it's great to make you feel more human again and take that performance aspect off of dancing. Like when you dance in public, it's like a mating dance. It's like a performance show. And it's all about how you look. In this case, it doesn't matter how you look. It doesn't matter if it even approximates dancing. It's about getting your body to move. And so many times just the tears will flow and emotions will come up. Sometimes rage and anger. Sometimes will all come out in that too if I've been bottling that up. So it just allows the instrument to release and expel anything that's been holding. And typically by the end, you just allow those snowflakes of joy to just come in and touch your skin. It's dope.
How long is a session typically? How frequently do you try to do it? Any music recommendations?
Yeah. You can do it shorter, but I think at minimum you need probably 20, 30 minutes because the first 10, 15 minutes, you're still going to be getting into it. And the real magic happens in the middle. And then fatigue starts to set in, depending on your fitness level, around 30 to 40 minutes. So I try to take an arch from, actually, when I do it, I follow Stan Grof's basic prenatal matrices kind of model.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, so that starts like you're in the womb, right? It's something very comfortable, some kind of music that's, smooth. It's like everything's taken care of. The universe is good. Some very kind of happy.
Any playlists you can recommend, or what would people search for?
For that music, anything with kind of like a very slow, positive kind of beat. I have like obscure spiritual music
this
that I
would be
use.
Like massage, tribal music.
Yeah, just
Spa,
something with a
tribal
beat.
music.
Yeah, that just like feels good. It's happy. Yeah. And then I go into the next thing that happens is like the water breaks. It's chaos, right? So chaos around you. You're imagining in the birth process. The water breaks. You don't know what's happening.
So
your world is collapsing.
Is like 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, like 6, 7 minutes, and it's just kind of swaying. And I usually stretch a lot of times. And kind of stretch. Sometimes I lie on the ground. A little bit joint mobility, a little bit stretching, getting into it. And then, if I'm doing the practice, I'll go into that more chaotic mode, which is a little still hard to dance to. And it forces me to do weird patterns. And I like violin, like Lindsey Sterling is a great one. And then, so it's like some weird kind of staccato violin, some Beats Antique music is sometimes good in there.
Beats Antique is great.
Beats Antique is awesome.
Lindsey Sterling violin. Also, we brought up Alice Little earlier. One of her favorite types of music to have sex to.
No shit.
Side note.
I see that. Right. Then from there, I go to there is the fight. And that's where you actually see the birth canal and you have a goal, tunnel vision. You got to get out. You got to breathe. You're going to fight with everything you have to breathe. And that's that warrior archetype. So for that, it's almost always Tribe Called Red. Like that's my go-to. And that's like EDM mixed with like tribal Native American cries. And there's some great tracks for that. Like a Electric Powwow, like some awesome tracks for that. And then, so from there, that's where you really start to express that kind of warrior archetype and allow any of those emotions to come. And then finally at the end is the more kind of ecstatic, blissful, but still a beat. So some like really upbeat EDM or some really positive, uplifting music. And I usually will take a break with something that's kind of quiet and serene, like Welcome to Africa, everything is beautiful kind of vibe. And then into some more, positive message like EDM and just kind of dance it out and really enjoy and express like the happiness of taking that breath, rebirthing, becoming anew, embracing your new self. And that's the BPM 4, which is the ecstasy of breath. And so that's the pathway for the full kind of shamanic road. Sometimes I'll just go straight to the Tribe Called Red. I think you've met him too, Porangi, who came out with this ayahuasca remixed album. He's got a couple great tribal drum tracks, which are good. There's a remix from Drum Spider and Mose in there. I think it's tracks 3 and tracks 8 on that. You can get it on Spotify. But I can share a Spotify playlist too of an ecstatic dance. That'll do it.
I will, for everybody listening, I'll put the Spotify playlist in the show notes. And it's what strikes me listening to this, because I know nothing about ecstatic dance, is that the narrative is really important. I mean, It seems like it's not the hero's journey, but the narrative arc of the playlist is really important.
Yeah, and this is just something that I came up with. I've been obviously, my father worked with Stan Groff, so he's used that metaphor, and it just kind of stuck with me. Like, oh yeah, these are all things we feel. Everything's cool. Oh shit, everything's not cool. Everything's fucked up. Yeah. And then like, all right, everything's fucked up, and I'm gonna fight, and I don't care. And there's a way out, and I'm gonna fucking make it. And it's just kind of pound your chest, like I got this. And then it's like through the other side, like, I got this because I got all this help, and I'm fucking grateful, and here I am. And that's, the tears really flow like at the end when you're like, man, life is good.
Now, do you use this therapeutically when needed, or is it something that you do preemptively or on a scheduled basis to prevent?
Yeah, I should do it more like prophylactically, like preventatively. But I tend to do it when I feel funky. Like when I feel funky, I'm either changing my temperature drastically, going in the sauna, or going in the cold, or doing something like this. But this is probably the best tool because it really just unifies everything for me. It brings it all together. You don't need anything. You just need a little bit of privacy or someone you feel comfortable. Now at this point, I'm actually comfortable doing it with other people, like watching, because I've talked about it enough, and it's a little external pressure, but then you just breathe into that pressure. Like the goal here is to go where you're uncomfortable. So like when you're comfortable alone, then invite somebody who might be a little judgmental and see, all right, can you still dance? Can you still that? Because I guarantee you by the time you're done and you've just expressed yourself, their judgment's going to be gone and they'll probably be dancing with you. So breathing in, it's that, kind of stoic training, like breathe into those areas where you feel restricted, where you feel judgmental, where you feel like the eyes are on you, and try to unify that all together.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of a quote, and I'm not going to get the attribution right. Wait a second. Donald Neil Walsh, maybe someone, I'm sure it might be Jim Rohn. Someone can correct me, but life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And this is, and how do you put that into practice? It's with activities like this. Training regimens like this.
Especially for men who are tough. Like men are tough, and like a tough man can get in a cold bath, and a tough man can get in a sauna for a long time. Yeah. And it's like, it's in our sweet spot. We're like, I got that.
It's comfortable discomfort.
It's comfortable discomfort. This is uncomfortable discomfort. Getting your arms way out there and moving those around and shaking your hips. Woo, that's uncomfortable. Yeah. That's real uncomfortable. But when you break those patterns, then there's just a whole new freedom that's available.
So you mentioned, we'll go for just a couple more minutes, but you mentioned the book. So I have a copy of this at home, and a number of people picked it up, and also almost immediately gone to the sex chapters, understandably. But can you describe the book? Give us a preview. Why the book? What is it called? How did you choose the contents? Let's start there.
Well, really, this book is the embodiment of that idea of total human optimization, which is not just one thing. I really admire the people, yourself as one of those people who you'll track something down to the very nth degree and like really bring home the bones of that truth from your journey. And I've been surrounded by a lot of people who've done that. But what I felt like was missing was someone to bring it all together, like bring all the practices, who've tried all of the different things. And how does that look? How does it look to go through a day? Like, what's the morning things you do? Okay, hydration, light, movement. Okay, then how do you bring in Wim Hof breathing and cold exposure, heat exposure? What are the nutrition principles you want? Like, how do you optimize your commute to work? What are some workplace practices that you've learned? Then when you go home, how do you relax and connect with yourself and connect with your family and your friends? And how do you drink a glass of wine? What's too much wine? What happens when you drink too much? Because that's all part of life. Like addressing all of those things, how to have great sex, and then how to, transition from that into the time before bed where you're taking care of yourself and journaling. And then from there, the sleep practices. Sleep was a huge one for me because everybody's telling you, and there's a bunch of bullshit out there. Like everybody's saying, oh, you need 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Like that's a fucking fantasy. No. Like I might as well be riding a fucking unicorn with a, rainbow headband. Like that's not going to happen for me. Yeah. So I read Nick Littlehale's book, Sleep, and he talks about getting 30 to 35 sleep cycles a week, and then changing the dynamic of that, utilizing naps more. I napped right before this podcast, and how naps are reliably shown to be more effective than more overnight sleep or more coffee. And so just bringing in all these interesting things from books I've read, people I've met with, people who've researched in different areas, and try to bring this into a comprehensive day, along with all my own mindset practices, like talking about mental override, telling stories about Bodie Miller and the great fighters I know and the great champions I know, and just put this together and also remind people like, hey, like I haven't got it all right. I tell the stories of when I used to relentlessly eat cinnamon Pop-Tarts and how unbelievably, unfathomably nutritionally bad that was. It's like sugar frosting on sugar dough on sugar filling.
Yeah.
Like what?
The triple crown.
What was that? But I was there. I did that stuff. The double Western bacon cheeseburgers and what the new double Western bacon cheeseburger looks like with grass-fed beef and raw cheese and sprouted or sourdough bread, and how you can just live this robust life, not engaging with capital F fear, which is, I think, the virus that underpins a lot of our malaise, and try to have a real healthy, joyful expression and, recognize this life, as I said on that billboard, welcome to heaven.
What is the title of the book?
The book's called Own the Day, Own Your Life. And the idea is, fuck all these long-winded transformational programs where you focus on one thing for 30 days, 40 days, 90 days. Let's just focus on doing one day awesomely, from top to bottom, schedule it out, get all the practices in line. I have very clear prescriptions. Let's just focus on one day and see how you feel living one day like that. And that's all you got to do. Just commit to one day, not only one day, just commit to 1 hour at a time. Just commit to all right, what are the 3 things I got to do when I wake up? All right, 12 ounces of water with some sea salt and some lemon. Okay, I got that. All right, 10 minutes of sunlight. Okay, I got that. A little bit of movement. Okay, I got that. Whew, on to the next thing. Yep. That's all you got to do. Step by step, relax into the process, do it for one day, and see what changes in your life.
When in doubt, 6 breaths. 6
breaths to quell the dragon fire so you don't burn down villages.
This is the book. Do you have a site for the book?
Yeah, ownthedaybook.com.
Ownthedaybook.com. And if you were, let's see, I'm trying to think of the right age to choose. So you can choose the age of your younger self. So it could be at that 29, 30, just getting started with Onnit. It could be far before. Could be you of a year ago. Doesn't matter. You can pick the age, but what advice, if you had to give advice to your younger self or someone just like you? Because a lot of people like me are like, I don't want to step on the butterfly because I'm pretty happy with where I am. So I wouldn't give any advice. But if you had to give some advice to either a younger version of yourself or just someone who's similarly built.
Yeah, advice to my younger self is going to be, relax, man. It's going to be all right. It's going to fucking be all right. Yeah. It's this crazy thing where in hindsight, we can always look backwards and say, man, I'm grateful for all that shit. I'm grateful for all my failures. But with foresight, we look at everything that's coming ahead with terror. Yeah. This next thing is going to be, that's going to be the one that knocks me out. Oh, that next illness is going to be the one that kills me. Oh, that next failure, that's going to be devastating. But always in hindsight, we're grateful. So what if we switched our hindsight into foresight and was like, oh, whatever happens, I'll just be grateful for it later anyways. And then all of a sudden we're really enjoying ourselves, and I was terrible at that. The first few years I started on it, I was petrified that it was going to fail because I was so attached to its success. I'm finally doing it. It's going to fail. No, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. I'm going to ruin it, and I didn't enjoy it. And I didn't really enjoy those initial formative years like I could have. And, so in almost every age and almost every era, it would be, relax, man, trust whatever happens, you'll figure out a way, you'll be better, stronger, faster, wiser for it. So be grateful for it in advance.
Dig it. And where can people say hi on the internet, learn more about what you're up to? Where would you like people to check you out, your projects and so on?
Yeah, I think, Instagram is probably my most active. I post to all the social platforms, but it's just at Aubrey Marcus on Instagram. And I curate all those posts myself. And it's a good wide variety of me doing weird stuff in the gym and me posting spiritual quotes and different ideas. And I actually look forward to those times where I get, sideswiped by the universe, because I always have some pearl I can come, and I generally put that out on Instagram or a podcast. And of course my podcast too, the Aubrey Marcus podcast. That's a great place to listen to me have some cool conversations with people.
Perfect. And I will link to all of that in the show notes for folks, as usual, tim.blog/podcast for all of the links, resources, books, and so on that we've discussed. Aubrey, good to hang, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'll go under, over. There we go. We're still figuring out the setup here with the wires. That is my fault. I'll take all the blame / credit.
I should have gone under.
It's okay. Next time.
Next time.
A little, how's your father?
So, you know, I had a friend who grew up in a cannibal tribe, and that was the traditional. Yeah, that was a tradition. He's a famous author, by the way.
Yeah.
And that was the traditional greeting. They would grab each other's genitals,
And give
they would tell them. You know what they would tell them?
No.
I would eat your feces.
Wow.
That was the greeting. Grab someone's genitals and say, I would eat your feces.
I hear that's the new thing to do in Brooklyn. I hear
That's the hipster way to do it, guys. So feel free to take that. It's free.
By the way, 0.01% people who listen to this podcast and take everything literally, that's a joke. Please don't do that. You might get shot in the face.
Yeah, no, that's not allowed.
Aubrey, always fun to hang, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, brother.
And to everybody listening, as always, until next time, thank you for listening. Be safe out there, and don't forget 6 breaths. Talk to you soon.